Then we want to talk about the purpose statement now. So far, has everybody understood what I said? Am I clear, or is it as clear as mud? The purpose statement is different than a proposition or thesis. The purpose statement is writing in your introduction what you want to accomplish when this sermon is completed. What you want the people to do. What you want to happen. And that would guide you. Usually, a good purpose statement includes a proposition if you have taken a course on preaching already. But it is different. If you use only a proposition, you would be landing up very locked up into how and why questions and inductive and deductive logic, and would not allow you to expand. Because if you have a goal, it doesn't make a difference how you get to your goal. But if you are locked into a system of answering questions, you are locked into that system. This gives you the freedom to ask questions and to do anything as long as you reach your goal. There are three purposes. There are many, many purposes for preaching a sermon that you need to decide on when you start a sermon. Am I going to inform the audience? Say you take the second coming of Jesus Christ. Am I going to inform the audience from the text you read and the sermon you develop? Am I going to just give them information that Jesus is coming soon? Very important. Need to write it in. I am going to inform my audience that Jesus is coming soon, so you're just dispensing information. Secondly, you want to persuade people. But persuade is mean to influence people to make a decision over a period of time. I want to influence people to be ready when Jesus comes. The same subject, the same passage, but a different reason why you're preaching the sermon. Understand? And the most difficult of all is to motivate. I want to motivate people to be prepared for the coming of Jesus today. And so you want immediate decision. While information is thus dispensing information, persuading is to cause people to go home and think about what you said, while motivating is to get people to act immediately. And more focused you are in your purpose statement, it's more clearer it is for people and the audience. J. Adams said, speaking to inform largely focuses upon factual content. The intent is to communicate new information to the mind. Speaking to convince presents evidence and reasoning that lends to conclusions and should influence belief. Speaking to motivation adds a psychological or emotional element in order to get listeners to act upon the information and conclusion. Motivational preaching is the language of good movies and drama. It is the language of salesmen. It is the language of television. John Brodus, a great homiletician, said, the ignorant uses emotional appeal too much, while the cultured use it too little. We need a balance to do motivational preaching. That's why I have said over and over again, Pentecostal preaching starts with the re-experiencing of the text and moves the audience emotionally and intellectually to experience the text and the presence of God. Not emotionally, but emotionally and intellectually to experience the presence of God. So you cannot do motivational preaching until you are totally convinced of the scripture. And that is where it comes with re-experiencing the text, where God has spoken to you. You're totally convinced. I have no problems talking about Pentecostal preaching because I am convinced that every student in the world who have gone to a Pentecostal Bible college or pastors who have not gone to a Pentecostal school need to study Pentecostal preaching because you put Baptist in, you get Baptist out. You put Presbyterian in, and they get Presbyterian out. But you put Pentecostal in, you get Pentecostal out. And I'm totally convinced of that. I breathe it, I dream it, I think about it all the time. So if you're talking about tithing, and you're not tithing yourself, you'll really have problems with people, convincing people. Well, you see, they wouldn't know. You don't know anything about communication yet. Because we do not only communicate with our voice, we communicate by our attitude, by our facial expression, and people could receive double messages. So if communication is not only speaking, it's body language and all those things. And so people could see between the lines. And somebody said you could fool some of the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. Right? So you really have to be convinced. It's like trying to convince people that they need to go to China as missionaries. Well, I'll tell you, the Chinese students or Chinese pastors would have a better job in doing that, or missionaries, than me, because I have never even been to China. I don't even know where it is. I could pinpoint it in a map. I like Chinese food, but that's the extent of my exposure to China. But when you are convinced and you're consumed by a subject, it's easy to communicate that to others. And I would say Pentecostal preachers are very good motivational preachers. They not only preach to persuade and to inform, but they preach to cause people to change their minds immediately. It's like, here you are. You're making an ordinary salary. And here somebody comes and said, you should buy my Jaguar. It's only $75,000 US. And he gives you some reasons why you should buy it. And before you know it, with your meager salary, you buy a $75,000 Jaguar. Now, we are not selling a $75,000 Jaguar. We are selling something much more precious. We're communicating this message. And when we communicate it with passion, people become convinced. We call that anointed preaching, don't we? Boy, he was anointed. Yes, it is anointed. But it's also motivational type of preaching, to motivate people to do something. And as I said before, you'll find that if you preach the narratives, it lends itself to motivational preaching. You want to try something, just switch one sermon after you have practiced in class to motivational preaching, and you'll see the difference. Just one. Properly prepared, and you'll see the difference. I have had people testify to me why I have taught the course. Immediately, There's a difference. The city I was teaching before I came here, the pastors came back to me and the congregation came up to him and said, "What happened to your preaching? It has changed." And the rest is history. This is the sermon I preach, and I'm drawing, as I showed to you, the text, the subject, the introduction, the purpose statement. What did I preach? Why did I preach the sermon? I want to motivate my audience to aim for God's best for their lives. That is the reason I was preaching that sermon. And you see also, it has my proposition there also. God's best for your lives. So it includes both. Can you put your proposition also? Yes. But you don't read this. You don't preach this. This is for your own personal information. So don't do it when you're preaching. There are some cases you can. Adam said one way to check if you are reaching your purpose of preaching is read your conclusion and see if it corresponds with your purpose statement. Do they correspond? Does your conclusion urge the same action that you set out to urge? If it does not, there may be something wrong with the conclusion itself, or there may be something wrong in the body of the sermon. It may be that at some point in the body, the speech takes a turn so that your conclusion ends at a different goal than the one towards which you started out. Thus, the comparison of the initial purpose statement with the conclusion provides a very important checkpoint on the whole speech. Some students, for some reasons, doesn't get it. That they keep on repeating what I said, don't say it. I don't want to hear your purpose statement. I will pick it up when you preach. But they insist that they should. Now there are times that you can say, okay, I could tell, if it's a positive sermon, you can tell people, I'm going to talk about God's best for your life. How many people here would like God's best for your life? And you see everybody raise their hands. You see? So it is, when it's positive, I like that, you get people included in it. But other times it's best not to tell people. And, don't keep people in the dark. And, So generally speaking, when your purpose statement works, when the subject is best, the sermon reinforces the positive idea. And it helps the audience to understand where you're going in your sermon. You know where you're going. The audience know where you're going. They can anticipate when you're going to be finished. And like I heard of one preacher, he said, and in conclusion, and this little boy was with his grandmother, and he asked his grandmother, what does it mean? He said, it means nothing. Absolutely nothing. Here is some guidance